you all write comics, obviously. That's why we're all here, right? But you chose to you chose to tell history through your kind of unique lenses and really different lenses, and we'll get to that in a minute. But does the comic medium offer anything that's particularly valuable in history telling that other mediums might not offer? And also, does it have any shortcomings?
Well, I'll start. Books are better with pictures in them. Plain and simple as that. You know, I am a strong believer in the medium of comics, and in that the definition of comics can be very flexible. So it's this joining of text and image, and you know, as someone who has always loved reading, I know that, you know, I was probably like in 5th grade and my heart broke a little bit because that's when books stopped having pictures in them, you know. we learned to read with picture books. And as someone who's worked in education, I've watched a lot of hesitant readers back away from books that have big blocks of text and no imagery in it. And I feel like there's a lot to be said for meeting the people where they are, as opposed to expecting them to catch up to you, right? And if traditional history books and history texts and publishers aren't willing to tell the story of whether it's you know, the Black Panther Party or internment camps or just about whatever aspect of history that very few of us are getting in public school, then it's up to us to do it, right? And the thing is when I was a kid, I would have much rather had a graphic novel like, you know, the Black Panther Party or the Frederick Douglass book. There's, you know, I'm a grown man who still looks at books that when there's, you know, David Blight wrote a great book about Frederick Douglass, but it's like 900 pages and barely any pictures, and I'm still fighting my way to get through it. I am very much, I'm a very simple man in that way. I like my pictures, and I just think that I think that most people, most of us learn through a juxtaposition of text and imagery, and most of us learn how to read that way. And I think that it's almost ingrained in us to be drawn towards the visual. There's a reason why you know, a box of cereal has a, you know, picture of cereal on it and a tiger going, you know, they're great, because that resonates with us, and it also triggers our imagination, and it helps us. It helps us to visualize, and then we can, if we want to go beyond that, we can in terms of how we think and how we extrapolate information. So to me, it's not a question of what's great about this medium. It's a question of why don't we see more people doing it? Why don't we see more graphic novels like this? You know. It's especially because young people, you know, they gravitate towards it, and shouldn't we need to be doing more stuff for young people, right? Like I always say, I have no interest in writing to middle-aged people my own age. They're, you know, we're boring and we've already let the world go to pot. So
there we go.
Right. I was, it's great, David. I was watching that movie Inception a couple months ago, and it hit back on the streaming services. And I remember there's a part where Leonardo DiCaprio says, Inception is so hard. And I was working on a script right then. I was like, have you tried writing a book? Like, just, you can incept that. A lot of people, you just put the idea in a book and there you go. It's not, it happens all the time, guys. Come on. Yeah, I love that idea. And I've said that before. Like you know, and it's really, I know it's hokey when I say it, but it still makes me well up when I do. It's like, if you can put these history or these complicated ideas in a format that you can pass on anything that I've learned in my time or have witnessed in my time, and it can help somebody be their best self or skip any of the hardships that I've experienced in trying to learn something or mistakes I've made or other people have made, then we are making the world a better place, like one person at a time. And I mean, you do that enough times, back to baby steps from earlier, and you know, you're going to have potentially a real tsunami of positive force that you can put out in the world. It's just, it might not seem so obvious in the incremental steps in which it happens.
And Brian, you have firsthand experience with this, right? Because you actually worked in classrooms seeing kids read these comics.
Yeah. And you know, they would go to the library and they would check out graphic novels. Like that was their thing. Like, and I, I used to tell them, like, you know, human beings process data through images, right? And so we used to do this whole thing where, like, I would stand there and I would say, like, cheeseburger. And, you know, I'm like, what is happening in your mind? You know, what do you see? You know, do you see the letters cheeseburger, or do you see an image or some type of image that references a cheeseburger for you? And they're like, oh my goodness, et cetera, et cetera. And so, you know, I feel like, well, one, comics are dope, but two, like, that really hits in on who we are as human beings. Like, we're visual. Like, even when we're reading prose, like, we are developing and creating images that references that goes to those words. So if you create, you know, a graphic novel, a comic book, and you have the text and you have the image, it's literally the best of both worlds. It's literally like who we are. It's what we do. It's just out in front of us now.
I have no formal training to say this officially, but I call that the left brain, right brain effect. And that's sort of if you can build that aha moment right up there on the page, where it's the symphony of the, you know, you're building to it with your captions and your dialogue, and which is the whole structure, and the images are building it, and the reader can really assemble it all there in their own mind. I think that there's something special about the medium, and that it allows us to have that space to share without so much, with a little bit of ambiguity there for the person to have it happen in their own head.
Well, this is crucial. This also gets into, you know, right brain, left brain psychology sort of thing. But if you're reading a book about, or reading something about a real event or real people, and you see a picture of that person or those people, it becomes more real to us, right? Okay, I'm going to write an article about, you know, Frederick Douglass, and here's a picture of Frederick Douglass. Oh, he was a real person. When you make something of an abstraction, which is what comics are, they're an abstraction of reality, right? They're renderings of reality. It engages a different type of imagination, right? So I can look at a drawing of Frederick Douglass and so this is what Frederick Douglass looked like, except this is a cartoon. And now I have to process that it's part of the, almost like the willing suspension of disbelief, right? When we see a photograph, we take that the photograph is real, right? And it engages us in a more intellectual, logical way, whereas an illustration, a painting, engages us in a way in which we have to leap to or move to that conclusion of this is a representation of something real. And it's that, to me, is part of what makes, is what made this medium so amazing. And it's the reason why it took so long, I think, for film to, if we're going to move out of the genre of nonfiction, but just like the comic book movies, part of the reason it took so long was it took technology, filmmaking technology, to get to a place where that abstraction, where that imagination could be projected onto screen in such a way that we didn't all look at it and go, well, that looks fake, you know? So it's interesting. I mean, we're just now, right now, there's some kid, 10, 11 years old, who is going to grow up to be like the penultimate scholar of comics, and that will take this, what we're doing, seriously. And you know, as an instructor myself, I teach at Portland State University, but there's very few, you know, degree programs in comic studies, but that's going to change. And you know, at the risk of sounding like, you know, full of myself, like, we're all part of that change right now. These books that we're talking about, you know, it's interesting to me, and this is to Justin, it's as a teacher, you know, everyone talked about Mouse for the last 30 something years. And it's like, and I've been saying, hey, Mouse is a great book. You know, Spiegelman, he knocked it out the park. Could we please have something else? Right. And you know, they call us enemy. Is that something else? It's like, finally, there's this book that's like, oh, see, it only took nearly 40 years for us to get there. Now, hopefully, and there's so many other stories to be told, you know, there's, so yeah, I'm geeking out right now, just because the possibilities of what we can do in this medium are endless. The only thing that limits us is our imagination.